Hello there, everyone. This is Brother Birch. In this video, I'm going to introduce the week 4 team activity. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Design a simple relational database structure and create the schema in Postgres database. Okay, so we've been asked to write an application to store notes for users for general conference talks. All right, you must track notes for multiple users. The speakers should be tracked separately because you'll have multiple speakers or the same speaker for multiple conferences. Individual sessions of conference don't need to be tracked, rather just the month and year. Don't need to account for the fact that some speakers will speak multiple times at a conference, but assume that a note can be tied to a speaker and a conference. And then multiple notes can be added by the same user about a single conference talk. All right, so our assignment is to create the database for this application. Okay, so we need to keep in mind we don't want a bunch of redundant data, so we don't want to actually store the names of speakers inside of a conference session. If the same speaker is going to be used in multiple places, we'd have redundant data if we stored their names in each conference session. Instead, we might want to have a table of speakers and they'll have IDs that'll be referenced in the individual conference sections, and so that could be a foreign key relationship, and then we want primary keys for those IDs and different things like that. Okay, so design your database visually. All right, so however you want to do it. If you have Microsoft Visio, great. If you want to just write it down on a piece of paper and take a picture of it, whatever works best for you. I think the way that I'm going to do it is I'm just going to make just a simple little text file, and I'm going to pull that over here. Okay, so I'm going to split my screen here. Whoops. And kind of design my database visually. Okay, so it says put together database design. You may want to use collaborative image. I'm not going to use. Okay, so first it says that we're going to need some users, we're going to need conferences, and we're going to need speakers. Okay, so for my speakers, I'll just have a table called speakers. And then in here, I might want to have the columns, just like an ID, kind of like we talked about, so that we can reference it as a foreign key elsewhere, and then a name, and if you want to put other stuff in here, you can. Let's see, what else are we going to need here? We know that we're going to need a conference table, or conferences, either one. And then we're also going to need a table for notes as well. Okay, so our conference table might have some stuff like, it'll also have an ID, maybe a year or month. This we could do in a couple of ways. I could have just, is it spring or not, like have an is spring flag or something like that. But we'll just say year, month, and then maybe session number. Even though we don't have to have that right now, it says we don't have to worry about this, which session it is. But again, you can make this however you want to make it. Okay. Let's see, what else? And then looking at this here, it looks like we're going to need a note table, obviously, and then a conference talk table. Okay, so in my notes here, I could have an ID for the note. I could have a user ID, which will reference a user, which we haven't made yet. So let's go ahead and make that real quick as well. So we'll have a users table, and they'll have their own ID. So in the notes, we'll have an ID for the note, a user ID, and then a talk ID, okay, for which talk it's talking about. So I'll also need a talk table. Okay, and then in here, I just have an ID for that, maybe, like a speaker ID that would reference this guy up here. What else could I have? Probably a conference ID as well, and maybe a name for the talk. You could have all sorts of other stuff here, like duration of talk or, whatever. But this, I think, will be sufficient for what we're doing. So we'll have our notes with their own ID. They'll reference a user for whoever took the note, and then a talk. Okay, the talk can reference the speakers and the conference, and then it'll have a name. And then users, pretty sure we won't really need too much for that. you know, maybe some typical things are like a username, password, maybe a display name, like that. Okay. So here I'm kind of starting out, and I'm not doing anything visually or beautiful, you know, just kind of throwing things out here. But it's apparent to me how these different things will be working, you know. So this kind of references the table and the primary key of that table. So anytime I have an ID listed here, I can just kind of reference that as, as our primary key. All right. And then anytime we reference an ID, like what we're doing here, then we could have those be our foreign keys. Okay. So let's see what else. So this is a little bit of how I would structure it, you know, just kind of plan it out visually. Log into okay. Computers, create the tables you have designed, make sure that everyone on the team has a way of seeing and contributing to the SQL that is written. All right, so let's go ahead and start typing this out. I won't go too far into this. We'll go ahead and make one table, and then I'll leave the rest to you guys. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my project here. Inside this folder, my web folder, I'll just type a new folder for week 4. And I'll open up a new file, and I'll just call this create.sql. All right, so let's look at our tables here. I know we're going to need all of these ones. I'll go ahead and start with our users. Okay, so let me go ahead and split that so I have them both here. So I can say create table public.user. All right, and then open up these parentheses, and I'll just say ID. We'll say serial. Make it not null because it'll be our primary key. Okay, so it can't be null there. Have our username, say varchar of 100, and we'll also make that not null. That it has to be unique. All right. We'll have a password. We can say varchar of 100 as well for this one. And obviously that can't be null either. And then a display name. Let's say varchar of 100 as well, and not null. Okay, so there's one example of this. Now I don't have any foreign keys here, so maybe we'll make one more table. But that's all I need to create the user table. Okay, and that's this guy right here. All right, so now one thing that'll reference that user table is our notes. All right, so let's go ahead and make the notes table. Okay, so I'm just going to say create table public note, and same thing as last time, just open up these parentheses. I'll have an ID, which same as last time, we'll say serial, not null, primary key, and then we'll have a user ID, okay, which will just be an integer, which is not null. And the way we do a primary or a foreign key here, we'll just say references public.user that ID from that table. Okay, and then we'll have a talk ID and not null references, and this hasn't been created yet, public.talk ID. Okay, and so I could kind of start it off like that. You know, if I'm going to reference this here, I need to create the talk table up here first. Otherwise, I'll have some nice, beautiful errors shown in here. All right. But this is how I would get started. Let's look at our instructions one last time. So add appropriate foreign key relations to the table, log into Postgres on one of your computers, and create the tables that you've designed. Okay, so this is the script that I'm using. You're going to actually have to log in to actually create that script in your database. But this is how I would get started. So I hope this is helpful for you. And if you have any questions while you're working on this, just work with your groups and let me know. Thanks.